Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's press briefing with the Ministry of Tourism and Transport. Today, some very important announcements will be made in this room. I'm Donna Bush, and I welcome you to today's press briefing. We welcome our panelists, starting with the Honourable Minister for Tourism and Transport, the Honourable Kenneth Bryan, his Chief Officer for the Ministry, Mr. Strand Bodden, Mr. Paul Harleston, Director of the Cayman Islands Port Authority, and Mr. Klein, Chairman of the Cayman Islands Port Authority's Board of Directors. We also welcome members of the media, some of whom are joining us via Zoom, also senior civil servants, and of course, you, the public. We go first to Minister Bryan.
Thank you, Donna. Good morning to all who have joined us here in the studio for this press briefing. I'd like to also welcome everyone who's tuned in online and on the radio and on social media. The reason I've called this media briefing is to update the public on two very important areas which fall within the remit of the Ministry of Tourism and Transport, which I have the responsibility for. The first is regarding the Cayman Islands Port Authority, and the following announcement I will speak about is the new Cayman Airways service to Los Angeles. I am very pleased to announce that after following a competitive recruitment process, Mr. Paul Harleston has been appointed as the new director of the Port Authority from the effective date of the 27th of June 2022. Mr. Harleston is no stranger to the Port Authority at all, having previously served in the role for 14 years. He brings a wealth of knowledge in the port operations and returns at an appropriate time to provide the organization with stability and strategic direction. In the role of director, Mr. Harleston will oversee all harbor operations and the development of the authority's annual multi-million-dollar budget. He will also have the responsibility for ensuring the organization is appropriately resourced to operate safely and efficiently. Consequently, his experience, operational background, and leadership skills make him well suited for this position. On behalf of the Ministry of Tourism and Transport, I wish to congratulate Mr. Harleston on his appointment, and I'm pleased that the board has confirmed someone of his caliber to be at the helm of one of the country's most important gateways. I wish Mr. Harleston every bit of success in his new role, and I extend many thanks to the former acting directors, Ms. Beth McFeel and Mr. Dale Christian, who stepped up to the plate to serve in the interim. Thank you. Donna?
Much, Minister Bryan. We'll now go to Mr. Klein, the Chairman of the Board of Directors for the Cayman Islands Port Authority.
Thank you, Donna. I, too, would like to take this opportunity to happily welcome Mr. Harleston publicly to his new role as Director of the Port Authority. As most of you will know, the Port Authority has not had a permanent director for a period of over 3 years, which has caused some level of instability. When the board was appointed in late last year, we decided to do an assessment. We went through a recruitment process, and it was determined to take a bit of a break from the actual recruitment before actually getting a director in place, because the board wanted to assess the deficiencies, what was most important to the board, because that would obviously play an important role in making the decision in terms of the selection, because there was a field of strong candidates at that stage, which we've done. We're happy to announce, Mr. Harleston, we think that this is exactly what the port needed at this point in time. In addition to the other responsibilities, another deficiency that was identified was one of human resources. The port is quite a large organization in terms of human resources, and for over 3 years they were operating without a HR manager. So one of the first tasks that Mr. Harleston has been given from the board standpoint is looking at organizational structure and addressing those deficiencies. Mr. Harleston, as the minister mentioned, has responsibility for the operational aspect of the port, and we're also happy that Mr. Harleston, with his experience, will be able to address another concern that has been identified, which is the one of safety where there's some concerns that has been raised. In regards to the front-facing aspects of the port, we're also happy to announce that the board has initiated 3 subcommittees. There's an audit and risk subcommittee which was specifically requested, contrary to some media reports, but the audit and risk subcommittee was specifically requested by the Auditor General. That committee is being ably chaired by Ms. Jackie Scott. We have an importers subcommittee, which was designed to meet and discuss concerns and challenges by our largest importers, being our customers, and that committee is chaired by board member Ms. Irma Arch. And then there's an enhancement committee, which is chaired by the representative of the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Richard Parchment, who also is the deputy chairman. We are excited and we look forward to the board working together with the ministry and Mr. Harleston on initiatives to improve the port's efficiency, financial stability, and customer service, while also ensuring a safe, healthy, and pleasant operational environment for the staff and clients of the Port Authority. As the Minister said, others have stepped up in various capacities to ensure that the port has continued to function efficiently, and we thank them for their service as well as all the other members of staff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glidden. We now go to the new Port Authority Director, Mr. Paul Harleston.
Good morning, everyone. I will keep my remarks brief, as I'm known to do. I'm sure there'll be other opportunities in the future for the Honourable Minister and the Board to expound on what is taking place, good things at the port. But I must say it is indeed a privilege to once again be the Port Authority's Port Director. As the Minister said, I was there for 14 years before, and before that I was the Deputy Director for 9 years, and before that I was the Government Auditor in charge of the port, so I have a pretty long history with the Port Authority. I am looking forward to working for the board. We already had a meeting, and by extension with the Minister, the Chief Officer in charge of the port. I believe that together we can enhance the operations of the port, which the Port Authority, which also includes Cayman and Little Cayman. We must never forget that they are part of this equation also. In the short time I've been back, I've been, amongst other things, reaching out on a personal basis to staff, which is so important. And as you may be aware, that the majority of current staff of the port and I have previously worked together. I believe it's fair to say that I have continued to have a great working relationship with them. Thus, the transition back has so far been quite smooth. In closing, I would like to thank everyone, especially the port staff, which is 100% Caymanian, for their dedication, and I will endeavor to always do my best under the guidance of the ministry and the board. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harleston. We're now going to take questions from members of the media, starting with Mr. Ralph Lewis from the Caymanian Times. And again, these questions that are first being asked are related to the port announcement.
Good morning, gentlemen of the panel, and congratulations to Mr. Harleston. My questions are fairly brief today for this segment, but with, the chair mentioned some issues with staffing. Mr. Harleston, do you foresee a significant increase in the staff at the port in the near future?
My answer to that would be that there are positions that are vacant now for a number of reasons. We've had, unfortunately, people who have left us permanently in terms of passing on. And with the COVID, we've had a lot of people out due to COVID, and positions had to be rearranged. So I don't see a large increase, but I do see that at least the positions that are vacant now will be filled.
So Louis, if I could just use that as an opportunity, to identify what I mentioned, HR deficiencies. When the board was looking, it was having to consider the various levels. So at the senior management level, I think the public would be aware that there are some deficiencies at the deputy director level. And so when we were looking at a recruitment exercise, that weighed heavily on the decision as to whether we would be able to hire someone with, for example, managerial experience, but not significant port operation experience. If we had a strong level of deputy directors, it would be obviously easier to get someone with managerial level experience. But in the absence of strong deputy directors, the board felt it important to have someone who had a long-standing experience with operational aspects of the port. And so the director who has responsibility for ensuring that those positions are filled is charged with ensuring that we have a strong deputy team. And most importantly, as a part of the interview process, the board was very encouraged to hear during Mr. Harleston's interview his plan for succession planning. It is a 3-year appointment, and the intention is to put strong deputies in place so that in 3 years we have a replacement that would be able to step into the position of director.
Okay, thank you. All right. The final question is for you, Mr. Glynn. In light of the increased activity at the port, do you foresee any developments in the infrastructure at the port going forward?
Sure. The government's position has been quite clear from the onset. There won't be developments in terms of a berthing facility, which has been a discussion around the port for a long period of time. But as a continued improvement and evaluation process for the assets, it's going to be important for us to continue to ensure that the country is equipped with best-in-class facilities. And so as a part of that, one of those subcommittees that we mentioned, the Enhancement Committee, for example, there are opportunities we feel with the current plan to improve on the customer experience for crews, as well as make enhancements to the facilities in regards to cargo. So we intend to improve on those facilities, not just in Cayman, but we've already done a site visit to look at issues that have been presented in terms of the other ports that fall under the ambit of the Port Authority, specifically Cayman Brac and Little Cayman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Donna.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. We now call on Wendy Ledger from Cayman News Service.
I might have some follow-up questions. It's quite a lot to read up and go back in history. Anyway, but I'll start. Mr. Harleston, can you tell us why it was that you left in 2015? You've always said you weren't fired, so...
I will defer that question perhaps to Chief
Yeah,
Officer.
Well, thank you, Mr. Harleston, for referring to the Chief Officer. But Wendy, I think his selection now today would have no bearing on why he left. And I think we're hoping today, with your blessings, to move forward in a positive direction. We recognize that he has the skill set necessary to do the job and the experience. And hoping that regardless of what reasons it was he departed from the port, shouldn't affect the benefits of what he can offer to the port today. Again, the political arm of it don't have any influence in the hiring and firing of civil servants or public servants. But in light of moving forward in a positive direction, I'm not sure. I'm not telling you what he'll do, but hopefully that wouldn't be a relevance to his appointment today.
I think it's relevant, but anyway, Mr. Harleston, can you tell us what's different today to what was occurring then, when you left? Well, like, what's different now as to why you've come back?
I think the port had went through a phase where there were a number of acting and port directors, and I believe that my return will provide some stability to the staff, to the board, in terms of the operations of the port. That is one of the reasons that I am back.
Will any other ex-official, ex-senior management team people that have left recently be coming back, such as Mr. Joey or Mr. William?
I can't answer that question.
Well, the appropriate process is a recruitment exercise needs to be done. So I think it'd be actually inappropriate that anybody answers that because there's an assumption of influence. So I'm quite sure, regardless if a person worked somewhere before or not, the panel who makes that assessment will make the determination on the benefit or the negative to whether a person has been there before. And obviously the port board and their process has made that assessment and determined whatever past history for Mr. Holston has no bearing on his opportunity to do what he has to do now. And I expect that Mr. Holston will do the same with his hiring, with everybody below his ranks that he has the responsibility for.
Okay.
Wendy, I think the chairman has a follow-up.
Okay.
Just to answer Wendy, in terms of positions and potential, as the Honourable Minister rightly said, there's a process to be followed. The director will be responsible for ensuring the recruitment and the most suitable people are hired in those positions. But it's important to note that the port is a pretty specialized operation and that there is a limited pool of individuals. We pride ourselves on so far being able to remain 100% Caymanian. But there is a position, for example, of Deputy Director of Operations, which is a pretty specialized position. There's a Deputy Director of Finance, and there's also the Deputy Director position of Admin. As those positions are advertised, we don't know who will be applying for those. We would hope that the most suitable candidates that the country has to offer will apply, and that the process will determine if they're selected or not.
There's been a lot of sort of lower down the ranks. There's been an awful lot of unrest at the port for quite some time. It's not a new thing. Do we think it is to do with the fact that there just isn't enough staff, and that the port does need to recruit a lot more people at the bottom level, like the actual people that do the work?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, from an operational standpoint, obviously we're limited with our expertise at an operational level, but we can say at the board level that we have approved the recommended organizational structures, including the staff at the lower level. We give full support to the authority in terms of its staffing requirements. And, as a part of the assessment, we think that some of that discontentment has been because of administrative senior level positions not being filled. For an organization to have the number of, close to 170 staff members without a strong HR department, without a deputy director with responsibility, obviously that's a significant concern for the board, and we think that addressing that area will address a lot of the staffing concerns that have existed.
Just final question now, really, about infrastructure. I couldn't hear very well what you were saying. Obviously, we're all agreed that the cruise berthing facilities are off the board, even though you were a big supporter. Can we just clarify what you mean by enhancing the customer cruise experience, and what does that mean for cargo? Like, are we going to have to build a new cargo port so that we can import even more stuff to put in the landfill, or are we going to try and live with what we've got and not build any more?
So when we talk about enhancements, we think of things like ensuring that there are shading facilities. We've always seen the long lines of our guests, ensuring that the guest experience as a premier tourist destination remains, that the first and last impression that is given of Cayman is going to be a positive one. And so we look at improving on the existing experience from our guests, and the same for cargo, reducing wait times, improving delivery times for cargo. In terms of port enhancements, I've made it very clear, my position as a policymaker was one position. I'm not in a position as a policymaker now. I follow instructions, and instructions were clearly from this administration was there won't be any cruise pier enhancements. And that's what the board is happily working with.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks.
I'd like to now call on Ms. Glidden, everybody in the panel, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to now call on Andrea Harris.
Good morning.
Morning.
Picking up right on where Wendy left off, as far as, so you've made it very clear that there won't be any cruise berthing facilities, but as far as the enhancement parts of the the current port facilities are concerned, first off, what's the budget for this? And second, are we looking to just incorporate the on-land plans that were already in place, or are we starting from scratch here?
Angela, thank you. I'm obviously going to allow the chairperson to address the question because from operations of the board, that's his responsibility. But I want to speak to the policy direction of this government. We would like to, from a Department of Tourism, enhance the experience for customers coming off the cruise. There has been no budget allocated specific to that. What I would expect from the chairman and his board members is to assess what ways we can improve that for the cruise passengers and come back to me as minister to go back to my colleagues and my premier and say, listen, this is the X amount of money that we need to do so. And the reason I say about the financing is because we recognize we're coming out of a pandemic and the financing at the port isn't what it once was in respect to numbers. But happy to say that that is improving. While they do that assessment, working with the necessary technocrats and some members of the cruise industry to help with giving ideas on how to improve that, by the time that conclusion is done, then we can collectively together as the stakeholders decide what we can do within the budget that is available to us. So there has been no specific project or set of plans or set of monies for it, but it's the government's commitment to improve that when the finances are available.
And just to pick up on that point, I think that one of the points that may have been missed is that the port has been limited for a number of years as to its improvements because there has always been a discussion or a plan for berthing facilities as a part of the bigger picture. With the government coming in and we're clearly stating its position, it now allows the port to plan instead of waiting. I mean, and this affects many areas. For example, our tenants were only allowed to get a year-to-year lease on their rented facilities because there was always an expectation that there could be an announcement or there could be a plan in terms of berthing facilities that would impact them, and the Port Authority would want the ability to make whatever decisions or moves were necessary. With having a clear plan for at least the next 4 to 5 years from a term standpoint, from a policy position, now the port can look at longer-term plans. So when we look at enhancements, things simple as shading, there has been proposals made to the port before that there are private sector partners. Specifically, the Chamber of Commerce has expressed an intention of working with the port in terms of providing shading, and maybe it can be paid for through advertising, right? So opportunities are there, and we look forward and are committed to working together with the Department of Tourism, working together with the ministry, doing whatever we can to enhance the experience.
Thank you. If I might, a quick follow-up. What's the timeline for not just the Enhancement Committee's review, but the other 2 subcommittee reviews?
No timeline. It's an ongoing review. We see there always as being a need for, well, obviously it was identified in the Auditor General's report as to having the importance of having an Audit and Risk Committee. The Importers Committee is specifically designed to ensure that our importers, our largest clients, appreciate the port as being a customer-driven entity. And so when they're having their concerns about delays in the delivery of products, we have inclement weather concerns. We wanted to make sure that our largest clients have access directly to the decision makers of the port, and that'll continue for ongoing. And the Enhancement Committee is the same. We will always be looking at opportunities to enhance the facilities of the port and ensure an ever-improving guest facility and experience.
One more question. Mr. Harleston, welcome back to the hot chair, I suppose. I've met with several members of your staff across the years, several of whom say the problems they face are systemic and have been in place for decades on end, which arguably means problems that were under your leadership. What's new this time? What's going to stop, or what assurances can you provide your staff and the general public at large that when you know that now that you're at the helm again, it won't be a repeat but a prolonged and continued set of problems?
When you say that there's systemic problems that have been there for decades, if you were more specific with it, I would could give you an answer. But like I said, I'm working with staff on a daily basis. My office door is always open. I am willing to talk to staff. And I think that's one of the greatest things that we can do is communications. So I will try my best. If there are problems, they can come to me, and I'll do my best to deal with them.
But
Angela, I want to thank you so much for that last question, but I would like to close off your question by saying that there are some differences today than there was then before, which is there's a different board, a different time, and a different government, which has a different policy direction. I don't think it's important to rehash what was happening then, because there could be a number of reasons why that wasn't successful. But I want to say for the record that some of the best times at the Port Authority was under the realm of Mr. Harleston. 14 years is a long time, and the port has been one of the authorities that have been very successful. Is it perfect? No, it isn't. But I think combined with the government's policy direction, combined with the leadership of the chairman and the board members, along with the experience of Mr. Harleston, and a commitment to get things changed, the port will go in the right direction. So I thank you for concluding your questions there.
not a question. Just to clarify, Mr. Harleston, by systemic, the issues they were speaking about were things which included a lack of training, HR-related matters, and complete lack of confidence in upper management.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. All right, now we'll go back to the Honorable Kenneth Bryan for his next announcement.
Are we going to leave out Ms. Shanda?
She didn't have any questions.
Oh, she didn't have any questions
No,
in the
sir.
port? Oh, what a kind lady. First, before I go on to the next subject, I want to publicly thank all the board members and the chairman and Mr. Harleston in this new direction for the port. But it's now time to move on to some very exciting news. With time being of the essence, I would like now to move on quickly to provide the latest update regarding Cayman Airways service to Los Angeles. I am pleased to confirm that Cayman Airways has received approval from the United States Department of Transport to operate a non-stop service between Grand Cayman and LAX Airport. While news about the proposed route has been reported in the media, there are a few updates that I think is important for the public to be aware of. But first, I would like to say a few words about the thinking behind why this flight is necessary and the benefits it is anticipated to provide for our wonderful islands, both from a tourism and business perspective. The first obvious question is, why now? And why do we need to fly to Los Angeles? The answer is a pretty simple one. Our tourism industry is in the recovery phase following the pandemic. Although air arrivals are trending in the right direction, increasing month after month, there is still a long way to get back to pre-pandemic levels. There is no question that a direct service between Grand Cayman and Los Angeles shouldn't present a lucrative opportunity for Cayman Airways and the Cayman Islands to increase stayover visitation, that I'm sure of, as well as it being highly anticipated, particularly by the tourism and business communities. This service marks the achievement of an important milestone. Not only does it fulfill my ministry's goal to tap into new markets and grow visitation outside of our usual source markets, it also aligns with our broad outcomes 10 of our government's strategic policy statement related to tourism growth, development, and economic impact. Point 2 of the broad outcomes under 10 speaks to expanding and diversifying our tourism product and asks the ministry to do 3 things. 1, expand into emerging and secondary tourism markets, market to high net worth individuals, and thirdly, expand Cayman Airways routes. This new service fulfills all of those objectives, and once it becomes operational, it will be a game changer for our destination. By opening up the Western United States, we will be making it easier for travelers from Los Angeles and other feeder markets such as San Francisco and Seattle to have easier access to our wonderful country. This new route will also enhance our air connectivity for travelers originating from Asia and Australia, opening up our destination to even more markets that are currently underserved. This will make our islands accessible and more attractive to a whole new segment of travelers. And because Cayman Airways will be the only Caribbean airline providing a direct service from LAX Airport, we have an ideal opportunity to capture the attention of travelers, encourage them to visit our shores, and give them such a wonderful experience that they become loyal, repeat visitors to our destination. So why Los Angeles, and why not a different gateway? Aside from the fact that LAX consistently ranks among the top 5 busiest airports in the world and provides excellent connectivity, Los Angeles is the undisputed hub for the entertainment industry, and is the home for the most famous studios in the world. Bringing the Cayman Islands closer to Los Angeles in this way will help us to accelerate Cayman's film industry, which I know that you know that I am pushing very, very hard, by providing a direct channel to Hollywood. And it will also, along with facilitating business-to-business growth opportunities in this area, also financial services is expected to grow, as well as technology, healthcare, fashion, and the arts. The new Grand Cayman to Los Angeles route will begin on Saturday, the 5th of November, and will offer 160 seats on each flight. The timing of this route is in early November is a strategic decision that we believe will be instrumental for its success. Firstly, because it coincides with the start of the high season for travel, and secondly, because it allows our key stakeholders lead time to build the awareness of the market and to ensure potential travelers know that the service is available. The new route illustrates how Cayman Airways is being strategically deployed to open up new markets and drive inbound visitation to grow tourism and to benefit our amazing country. And it is yet another example of how fortunate we are to have Cayman Airways as our national flag carrier and tourism partner. Today's announcement is a proud moment for the Ministry of Tourism and the Department of Tourism and the team that worked so hard at it. And I'm sure it's also a positive day for Cayman Airways, the leadership staff, and all the board members. It has taken the entire team, the Ministry, Department of Tourism, locally and overseas in the U.S. offices, and Cayman Airways working tirelessly behind the scenes to make this route a possibility. I would like to acknowledge them all for their efforts and publicly thank them for their hard work and commitment to making this route a reality. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you very much, Minister Bryan. We're now going to go to the CEO of Cayman Airways, Mr. Fabian Worms, who joins us.
Morning. Thank you, Ms. Donna. Thank you, Minister. Morning to everyone.
Morning.
I'd like to start with a message from our chairman, Mr. Jude Scott. And it's a message of apology for not being able to attend today. He's off island. But also one of appreciation for the support that the ministry and minister has been giving to Cayman Airways as we pursue this route. So I'll just quickly read a few words from the chairman. We are delighted that Cayman Airways will be offering our valued customers non-stop service from Los Angeles to the Cayman Islands commencing in 2022. The Cayman Airways team is confident that with the strong support and vision of Minister Bryan and the PACT government, our new non-stop LAX route has significant potential visitation, economic, and job creation value for the Cayman Islands. Along with anchoring existing demand from the market, we look forward to building our strong relationships with the Cayman Islands Department of Tourism and our industry partners to stimulate increased visitation from the west coast of the United States and Canada, as well as Asia and Oceania. So those were the remarks of our chairman. In terms of my remarks on behalf of Cayman Airways, I would like to reinforce the minister's statements regarding why, with a little bit about Cayman Airways' history per se. And the decision to operate this nonstop service to Los Angeles is actually part of a continued national strategy for Cayman Airways to strategically act as an economic lever or accelerator for the Cayman Islands, which is something that we have been doing for over 50 years. Our new Boeing 737-8 aircraft, with their long range and environmentally friendly fuel efficiency, now allows the airline to be more strategic than ever before for the country. This type of mission, going to Los Angeles, is exactly what we had in mind when we were procuring the 737-8 aircraft. This and similar types of missions to distant gateways that are currently underserved, to open new markets for the Cayman Islands and give us diversification. With respect to the flight times to Los Angeles, the actual flight time for Cayman Airways flights with the new non-stop service from LA to Grand Cayman, it will be about 5.5 hours. This typically cuts the travel time in half. If you were to attempt to travel from Los Angeles to Grand Cayman now, you would spend the better part of an entire day accomplishing that journey. And we, of course, we're eliminating the stops. And we're in a day and age where stopping at airports is something that people really would like to avoid. So we think this in itself is intrinsically very attractive to the potential consumers. While we're boastful about how short the flight time will be, it's also the longest mission that we've ever undertaken with the Cayman Airways fleet. So in that respect, it's a long flight. And one of the things that we know our passengers have been concerned about quite recently is the issue of onboard entertainment. Now, traveling on Cayman Airways is an experience. Our passengers feel as if they have already arrived in the Cayman Islands the moment they board the aircraft. But over a 5.5-hour period, there's only so much that our crews can do to entertain and keep our passengers occupied. So we've always had this in mind, and we have an onboard Wi-Fi service on our Boeing 737-8 aircraft, which does not allow at this time internet connectivity. So you would not be able to actually watch something like Netflix from your own personal device, because that requires an internet connection in the air. But what we will have, or what we do have right now, is an onboard server with content that is very much like Netflix. So you will log on to that. The instructions are in the seat backs of all the seats. You will log on to that service, and you will pretty much have a very similar experience to that as if you were on Netflix in terms of movie content, TV shows. There's also additionally games, and there's a variety of literature. We're hoping that by the time we implement the LA service, we will have a lot of local content that we can load on this server as well. Additionally, there is music. So that is what we call our Sir Turtle entertainment system, and it's powered by a system called AirFi. So that's the in-flight entertainment experience. The flight times that we're envisioning is a launch on November 5. It's initially a once weekly flight. This is a conservative entry into the new market. We believe the potential is there for not just a second flight, but we think in reality we'll probably see 3 flights, because this is going to be, by all indications, a win. It's going to be a win for Cayman Airways and a win for Cayman. So it will depart Los Angeles at 7 a.m. On Sunday mornings and arrive in Grand Cayman at 3:30 in the afternoon. That's actually a very good arrival time for tourists, because it's just in time to check into the hotel and you get to enjoy the full afternoon. Right. Cayman Sunsets. That's actually a part of our own internal marketing program. We're bringing Sunset Boulevard to Cayman Island Sunsets. The departure from Grand Cayman will be on Saturdays, and the flight will leave at 3:45 p.m. and arrive in Los Angeles at 7 p.m., which are good, comfortable times. A 3:45 departure from Cayman works well for a tourist as well, with checkout time being midday. So this is going to be very convenient. So the cycle is we will leave Cayman on Saturdays. The aircraft will overnight in Los Angeles, leave Los Angeles early on Sunday morning, and get into Cayman for the afternoon. Again, to a tourist, I can imagine this would sound extremely attractive because there's no way on the same day of travel with connections to get here could you even enjoy any portion of the day. So this should be a win. There are approximately 8,000 visitors that visited the Cayman Islands from the LA, Southern California region in 2019. And one of the things we're trying to do as a country is get back to 2019 and surpass the 2019 levels. So using those 8,000 passengers as a benchmark, and using our Denver experience when we launched Denver, which was our first foray into a distant route that was previously unserved with direct service. When we did that, what we saw is that there was an increase in visitation in the first year, which was almost a doubling. It had a doubling effect. So if we're conservative and we project that with 8,000 traditional visitors, if we even look for a 50% increase in visitation, that would be a 4,000 count increase in visitors. And if you were to use a notional number of a $4,000 US spend per passenger as the initial direct economic impact, so we're speaking about what they would be spending on food, hotel accommodations, and of course there's a spin-off with the occupation tax, their airfares, all of what it costs for the initial spend. If you look at 4,000 passengers times $4,000, for New York as an example, we have very precise numbers that we use, and it's actually 5. So using 4 for LA is conservative. But you're talking about $16 million of a year just by operating one flight. So the economic impact is going to be quite significant. If we can increase that to 2 or 3 flights, then we're really starting to have a really, really significant economic impact. So we want to bear that in mind. In addition to the new route being obviously attractive for leisure visitors, which is the traditional tourists, it's also expected to provide economic growth opportunities by connecting businesses that are operating in the Western United States with businesses that are operating in Cayman. And there's already a very strong connection with businesses, particularly in the financial services sector. And there's a growing connection to do with the tech industry and film in particular. In recent years, there's been a lot of activity in Cayman to do with filmmaking. And of course, as the minister mentioned earlier, Los Angeles is the hub for that industry. So we see a lot of synergies. We see a lot of things coming together in this route. It's not just the typical leisure tourist. It's the business traveler for financial services. It's the tech industry. There's a bit of even health, believe it or not, that's in it. The private sector here in Cayman, whether it be the Chamber of Commerce, the health service providers, Enterprise City, the Film Commission, everybody is completely excited about this, and their outreach to their counterparts within the Western United States, California, Los Angeles in particular, has indicated a very strong and great reception to the notion that we'll be having a direct flight. So we wanted to share that as well. the access to Asia and Oceania, Australasia, as well as access to the US and Canadian West Coast. Let's remember one thing. Los Angeles, as the minister said, it's one of the top 5 busiest airports in the world. And it's because it's the main feeder airport into the United States for traffic that's coming from what we would normally call the Eastern Hemisphere. And we have not been able to conveniently tap into that onward connectivity until now. This will give us that onward connectivity. And the connectivity is going to work both ways. It's going to allow visitation from Australia, Asian countries, etc., but also allow Caymanian residents to travel to those portions of the world. We have a lot of Filipino and Indian members within our community who find travel to their homelands for their annual vacations, etc., somewhat difficult. So this will provide some degree of benefit in that regard. Its main purpose, however, is strategic, and it's to provide a bottom line contribution to Cayman in terms of the tourism component. But the good thing is there is this plus in that there are additional other benefits. Because it's an overnight flight, and there is enough time for the crew to have an adequate and legal rest and be refreshed to operate the flight the next morning. It also means that if anyone within our community would like to travel to Los Angeles, and whether it be a business dinner or a social dinner or whatever it is just for one night, these things are possible. The flight is not that long. 5.5 hours is not, it's not that long at all. We're working tirelessly behind the scenes with a variety of industry partners, so I don't want to leave them out. This is actually a very collaborative effort to launch this route, and a lot is going to come together by the time we do start the launch. But we're working very closely with the majority of hotels. We're working closely with the Sister Islands and the Cayman Islands Tourism Association. We're working with the Chamber of Commerce. We're working with the Film Commission. We're working with the Ministry of Industry and Commerce because they're proponents of growing new business, whether it be tech. We're working with people like Enterprise City. And of course, the Department of Tourism. There's a lot in store between now and November 5, which will include things like what we call a super fam trip, where we're going to be bringing travel agents and other key personnel from Los Angeles to actually visit Cayman so that they can assist in making the promotion successful from that end. So we thank the Department of Tourism for their hard work in that regard as well. Minister, I think that just about sums it all up. I would like to end with our slogan, "Those who fly us love us." We're an extension of the Cayman Islands, and we consider ourselves to be the island's #1 brand ambassador. So when that tail arrives at any airport, it grabs a lot of attention. It's now very well known. Wherever that tail goes, people now know that is Cayman Airways. So we are making a mark in the world. And it would be of no value if we're making the mark and not reaping the benefits. So we're looking forward after LA to doing more of this type of expansion. It would be in keeping with the PACT government's policy, and we're up for it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Worms. We're now going to go to members of the media. We'll begin with Shanda Gallego from Radio Cayman.
Hi, pleasant good afternoon, or sorry, good morning to each and every one of you. Mr. Worms, could you please...
Shanda, please go ahead again with your question.
please accept my apologies. We're having a lot of feedback from our broadcast. Mr. Worms, my question really is regarding the introductory cost to this service.
The airfares?
As well as when it will go on sale, yes.
Yes. Okay. We still have a few I's to dot and T's to cross to have all of our regulatory approvals in place. The main and most important approval was U.S. Department of Transportation approval, but we still have Federal Aviation Authority approval to obtain. And until that is done, we're not actually allowed to market or promote fares. What I can say is that we will be going into the market with fares that are going to be very competitive and attractive. The notion of a direct service by itself normally attracts a premium. We're just interested in filling the seats at this point and doing it where we don't lose money. So we're going to be as fair and as competitive as we can be as we launch the service. I anticipate that before the end of this month, we will have our flights loaded and ready for sale. And I ask that everyone keep tuned to our website, where we will be on our social media platforms, where we will be announcing whatever promotions we may be having with respect to pricing.
Any further questions,
Okay.
Shanda?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Donna. Mr. Worms, do you have any knowledge on business class seats, if they'll be offered out of the 160?
Yes, the aircraft are equipped with 16 business class seats and 148 economy seats. So that would be the typical offering on every single flight.
Mr. Worms,
Okay,
I
and
think
one last question.
Those seats, sorry, Shanda, those seats are powered with.
Yes, our aircraft were delivered to us with the business class seats having power to power your devices, whether it be your laptop or your cell phone or something in between. In the back of the cabin, unfortunately, when acquiring the aircraft, the cost of that option was prohibitive for us. And what we decided to do was wait and see and hope that by the time we had the aircraft, there would be lower cost solutions in the market. So there are some lower cost solutions in the market now, and we are working to see if we can have power in the seats before we start the service in November. That may be a bit of a tall order, but again, with a 5.5-hour flight, with careful planning on the part of passengers, if you charge your device, everybody has a device that typically can last the 6-hour duration of the flight. That's not to say that we don't want to be competitive with the other airlines that do have in-seat power. But the reality is we can't afford to have everything that we would possibly like at times. So we're also looking into the possibility of maybe as promotional items, we will be carrying on board what many of us are accustomed to using now anyway, which is portable battery packs. And they would be promotional items. We're exploring purchasing them in bulk so that a passenger that does need some power, we may be able to assist. With all of that said, we are still working to try and have the aircraft equipped with power, though, by that time. At least one or two of the fleet, if not the whole fleet.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Worms. And one
Yeah.
last question from me. Did you mention anything about the food and beverage service in flight?
Our food and beverage service know that most, if not all, COVID restrictions have been lifted, meaning no masks on board. Our food and beverage service is right back to what it used to be. It's fully normal at this time. One of the reasons our food and beverage service was curtailed recently, even with issues like, our passengers were saying, where is the rum punch? So the rum punch is something that it's made from different ingredients, and it requires human interaction to actually mix it. And one of the things we were trying to do while we were in the pandemic phase was to have as sterile an environment and as hygienic an environment as possible. We also did not want to be encouraging people to not be wearing masks by offering a full meal service, full beverage service, because passengers would use that as the excuse to not wear the mask for the entire flight. And it was a challenge enough for our cabin crews, and I thank them for their hard efforts, because they did get a hard time from our passengers, especially in recent times when we didn't lift our mask restrictions, but U.S. airlines had. So a lot of passengers just could not understand why it's a requirement for Cayman Airways, and our staff went through a tough period trying to manage those situations. But that is a bit of the framework as to why our services were curtailed, but everything is back to normal now. So on the LA route, of course, we'll probably, given the length of the flight, we'll probably even enhance that even more.
Thank you for your question, Shanda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Shana,
Worms.
thank you so much for your questions. I just want to support the CEO on a few things that was said in respect to, obviously, cost prohibitive measures due to going through this new journey and trying to stabilize the profitability and the success of it, and also recognizing the limitations of when the planes were ordered and what entertainment is available and all that. I think it's important that I tell the public that as we go through that assessment and those growing pains, that the ministry is going to give full support to Cayman Airways to ensure that the services that needs to be available on that flight to make sure that they're competitive in the market will be there for them. As you know, most people know that the Cayman Airways is seen as an economic accelerator. They don't make a profit because we subsidize the growth of our tourism product, and they're so essential to the Cayman Islands. So therefore, there's not lots of profits waiting around, and they when they make their financial decisions, they do so very carefully. And I want them to know that they'll have the support, because things like powered first-class seats, things like Wi-Fi, things like entertainment, and all these other factors that you expect with a leisure destination like the Cayman Islands for high-net-worth individuals, we have to ensure that we display the product of who we are and the standards that we are. Obviously, that comes with cost restrictions, and as the government continues to grow and get back in a better financial position, we will do what we have to do to ensure we keep the standard for Cayman Airways and our tourism destination. Also, it's important that the public, particularly those who are Caymanian, know that we now no longer have mask as a mandate on Cayman Airways, and it's important for us to be kept competitive in the market, particularly against a lot of the other U.S. major airlines. I'll address some other concerns after the other questions.
Okay. Before we move on to Mr. Andrel Harris, I have a couple of questions actually from members of the public. Actually, one is from CMR. The question is, with the recent and continued loss of Cayman Airways pilots, what's the replenishment plan?
Okay, I think more has been made of that issue than is actually the case. Cayman Airways currently has 42 pilots, and we just hired 8 more. So we are not faced with the perceived shortage of pilots that people think we are. There was something in social media recently about losing 1 pilot, and we had lost more before, and we're now only down to 8. So 8 is a far cry from 42, which is actually approaching 50. So whereas I will say there have been times when on particular days we have constraints with crew, especially during the COVID pandemic era, and we're even seeing a little of it right now where we have crews that are out sick. We have been challenged on particular days, but I can't say we have canceled any flights so far as a result of not having crew. What I can say is that we've often had to, maybe not often, but occasionally had to stand down on maybe operating an extra flight or a charter request because it would be a challenge for crew on that particular day. But we don't have a crisis at this point. We don't foresee one. Obviously, we don't run the airline casually, so crew planning is a very important element of running the airline. So it's one of the things that we pay particular attention to. We pay particular attention to the succession rates, and the ability to meet our demands in terms of our projections for growth. So we're not particularly worried at this time.
Okay. Another question. What about the music on the plane? Some people say that it's, if you play Calypso, it's like old Calypso as opposed to the new update. And wouldn't our passengers enjoy more updated music?
Yes. We've had people complain about Harry Belafonte's Deo. That is, in the view of many people who are tourists, that is an example of a song that represents the Caribbean, and it represents, I think. So, I think whatever music we put on board, we're going to have some who like it and some who don't. What we have done recently, because we have been receiving complaints about the type of music that was on board, is I'm not quite sure if we've had it revamped as yet, but if not, it's in the making. And what we have is music by all Caymanian artists, Caymanian musicians. Putting music on an aircraft as well, it's not something where we just download an MP3 from Apple Music and put it on the aircraft. There's licensing arrangements that we have to meet. If not, then it invalidates the licensing arrangement for the equipment that we play it on. It's all, the rules are very, very clearly defined. So what I can say to music is the music is changing. We think it's going to get better. Internally, we have done our polling, and from a huge selection of local music, we have narrowed it down to what we think will be, enjoyable by all.
Just to add a quick element to that, I think that didn't realize it's that big of an issue, but particularly because Cayman Airways is a key contributor to our tourism product, that we're going to ensure that the Department of Tourism works with Cayman Airways to finalize that list. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of science behind the atmosphere and environment that you deliver, and our key focus is to bring the economic value through our passengers, but of course our Caymanian people too. So maybe focusing on different playlists for different destinations, like your primary flight to Miami, maybe more locally driven, maybe have a different playlist. But if we're focusing on places that we know that are strategic, like Denver, which is prominently leisure passengers, that we focus that from a scientific marketing perspective for tourists, because something that we may hear every day that is attractive to us, maybe not something attractive to a tourist. So I'm saying there's a lot more science behind it than you think.
Thank you very much, Minister Bryan. In the interest of time, I'm going to call on Mr. Andrew Harris, as well as Ralph and Wendy after him. But in the interest of time, I'm going to limit you to 2 questions, Andrew.
My first question is to Mr. Worms. When we opened the Western gateways, shortly thereafter there was the issue of the Boeing 737 MAX 8, now Dash 8, swiftly after which we then ran into the COVID scenarios. So the Western gateways have never truly been tested to see the viability on a long-term basis. Given that in mind, what are the plans to, I should also ask, how many gateways are we operating, and will the Western gateways take away from what we currently have on the books?
Okay, you spoke about the Western gateways prior to the introduced just prior to the grounding of the 737 MAXs and the pandemic. Well, specifically, you're speaking about one gateway, which is Denver. And we've actually had enough of an experience with Denver. We actually did operate it now with the 737-300. We had to curtail the loads at times. but we did still see a growth in that market. I think the numbers went from 12,000 to more like 20,000 passengers per year because of the incremental number of seats that we added. So we have that data. It's not fair to say that we were not able to see how the passenger performance would have happened. What we didn't have was the ability to use the 737-8s and capitalize on the fuel efficiency and be able to carry a full load of 160 passengers versus curtailing our loads to maybe 90 on an aircraft that could only carry 122. So we're in a much better situation now, but in a known sort of environment where we know exactly what's there. And Denver is actually doing very well at this point. All right.
Minister Bryan, do we have the infrastructure in place to house the additional passengers when they do arrive?
Of course we do. If they have to stay at my house, they can stay at my house. Yes, Angel, just before I answer that question, I want to go back to your previous question about whether or not this flight will affect other routes.
Right.
Obviously, we have studied that. We worked closely with our director at the Department of Tourism and saw that the routes of persons who were coming to the Cayman Islands from California were using other gateways than the ones that we service. Like, say, for instance, Denver. They weren't going California, Denver, Cayman, because then we would just be hurting the Denver route. Most of the routes that we saw people were coming from California were serviced by non-flag-carrying carriers, so United, American, I don't want to call any other names. But we believe that we'll be giving competition and that money being made to our airline, and they will have to compete with us because we're going to be tapped into their market. So that's a great question, because when making this decision, we got to make sure we're not cannibalizing ourselves, and we've done that, and we don't think that that's going to be the case. In respect to staying, I think if my memory serves me well, the last count was 7,011 room stock we have in the Cayman Islands, and we're only at 55% right now currently, and expect it to be ending at just a little over 70% for the rest of this year. And as you know, there's a number of other hotel projects coming online in the coming years that we're excited about, and I hope we can approve some more. So once this becomes successful, and then we move from 1 flight a week to 2 flights a week to potentially 3 flights a week, that we'll be able to announce that there's more room stock. And as you know, the bed and breakfast and the Airbnb is constantly growing, which caused a bit of a housing problem to some degree, but I'm certain that with the potential profitability available with that service, that we will have no problem in respect to room stock.
I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Angel. Now, Mr. Ralph Lewis from Cayman Times.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon, Mr. Worms. 2 short questions. Is this new route going to be a seasonal one or year-round?
We're anticipating year-round.
Okay. And the final question is, can your fleet accommodate all these new improvements?
Absolutely.
And that the 4 MAX 8s and the 4 737-8s.
Absolutely.
And the others.
Absolutely. It can easily accommodate what we're doing with LA. And like I mentioned earlier, we also have our eyes set to do even more than LA.
Thank you.
I think you were saying whether they can accommodate the features or the routes.
No, the routes, actually. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, yes.
The
We can
routes,
definitely do it.
okay.
The
I know that's
aircraft
some-
utilization.
Yeah.
In other words, how much availability do we have? Yeah.
Actually, we want some more.
Some more
roads and
airplanes.
planes.
Yes.
All right,
Thank you,
Mr.
Donna.
Lewis. Now I'll call on Wendy from CNS.
My bestest buddy.
I'm down with the LA flights, you're all right. Just one thing, and I think it was a reader actually that brought this one up, so I think I'm going to ask it first because it's a good question. Obviously, the Department of Tourism helps you guys because it's not free to open a new route. You're going to be spending a fair amount of cash, and I mean, it would be nice if you could tell us how much you're spending on it, but you're going to be spending a lot, and I know the DOT helps with the promotion. But given that this is LA, the kind of people that are coming are going to be staying in some of these fancy hoop-de-doop hotels that we have. So are they going to help chip in and cover some of the costs? Because remember, it's public money that pays for Cayman Airways, and I don't feel it's right that my taxpayers' money pays for the Ritz to get some really rich people to go stay there. Do you get me?
Yes. So to answer your question, very, very good question. Yes, and they are going to play their part and invest in this exercise, in this journey that we're going to go on. But I want to clarify your point there when you said the people who are going to be traveling on the edX are only going to be the people who can afford it. And
no, I didn't say only, but are likely to be.
Likely to be. And I think that recognizing what the CEO said about there's different types of categories of persons that we're going to be targeting. Particularly, we have a very large population of Filipino nationals here in the country. And they may be helping service that because that will shorten their journey by almost a whole day. It takes them about 2 days to get to the Philippines. If they use this route, it'd be a lot shorter. But to say that those who are in the industry, particularly that of the tourism industry, I'm pleased to say, and unfortunately he's not here today, but I want to congratulate the president for CETA, Mr. Mark Langevin, for partnering with the ministry and Department of Tourism and Cayman Airways on this exercise. It is really sad that he's not here because there's so much credit should be given to him for brokering the ability to do this. So, for example, without giving you figures exactly, they will be assisting with the FAM trip. FAM is familiarization trip, where we are going to bring agents from across the West Coast, travel agents, agent bookers for your plans. They're going to be coming here, getting the experience. That's one trip we're going to do, and they're going to be helping us with accommodations in respect to that. We're going to have a separate trip to go to Los Angeles to launch the flight, where part we're going to entertain persons over there, bringing awareness to it. And the president of CETA, along with many other hoteliers, and I don't want to call the names specifically, but at least 3 of the hotels will be partnering with that, with their own international marketing about the announcement of this direct flight. So we're not doing this alone, and you're right, because they are the key beneficiaries of this exercise by filling their rooms. But Caymanians work in those rooms. We get a tax on it. So we're all in this together, and I'm happy to say that our ministry and our department is partnering closely with CETA along with Cayman Airways on this exercise.
Okay, cool.
And if you don't mind, sorry, just to add to what the minister is saying, there's something special happening here because I have never seen this level of desire for the local hoteliers and tourism to participate with Cayman Airways on anything as we're seeing now. So I think there's a paradigm shift taking place here, yes, which is causing industry to put more skin in the game for their own benefit, freeing up resources of the DOT to do greater work otherwise. That's just my own personal opinion, but I'm seeing something special.
Spot on.
Okay, can I just clarify that presumably there was a business case done to pick LA as opposed to San Francisco, or?
A business case will be available for your perusal in the near future.
May I just caveat that though? Really a business case generally has a lot of proprietary commercial information. What I can tell you is a business case has been in the works for LA with respect to Cayman Airways for many years. So what we actually have is a very refined business case. Not quite sure, Minister, if it's something that we would want to share publicly.
With what we have to retract, we will.
Yes.
But the media has the right to. We are a transparent government, and whatever available information we can provide for you, we will do so.
I mean, I know because LA's. You spoke about LA as soon as you got these planes, so it's always. I just wondered whether there was something.
Yeah.
It obviously made sense to you all to pick LA rather than San Francisco, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
And just finally, just as a spin-on from that, normally when we go somewhere, others follow. So has there been any expectation that maybe other airlines might start?
I'm going to speak to that in my closing. So.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Just to say that I know that you guys are aware of an announcement that I made recently in respect to the Caribbean Tourism Organization, better known as CTO. And at that conference in September, we'll also be having the IATA conference. At that conference, we intend to have some major panelists, other ministers of tourism across the Caribbean, particularly that of the Jamaica Minister of Tourism, Mr. Bartlett. And we're going to be talking about inter-Caribbean travel. This journey that we're taking is going to make us the lead candidate for connectivity to whole of Asia, to the whole of the Caribbean. And I'm excited about it. There's great things to come, and I believe in our team at Cayman Airways who've been servicing this country so well for so many years. This is going to be a success.
I was going to ask you if you had any final words, Minister.
Oh, yes. We do have to wrap it up because we've got the Chamber of Commerce luncheon. I want to firstly say continue to pray for our Honorable Premier as he's recovering from COVID. He's fine, but your prayers and your blessings will do him well. I would like to thank my team within the Ministry and Department of Tourism, as well as the representatives of the various boards on Cayman Airways, as well as the Port Authority, for being here with us, giving you, the people, the necessary information to know what's going on within government. Today is a day full of positive news about both of these entities, and I am proud to be the Minister with responsibility for tourism and transport, working with such a committed and capable individuals within my responsibility. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you to the public, the media, and of course our panelists today for being here for this press briefing. I'm Donna Bush. I wish every one of you a wonderful afternoon.